program. If you didn't get one earlier, we have the full printed out programs of all the films in the back ENTRE table right by Trucha. Feel free to grab one on your way out. I'm just going to introduce our panelists for tonight, and we'll just have a little bit of an open discussion about the work that they're doing here in the Valley, and also open it up to you all if you have any questions or comments regarding the films. Andres, we're good? We've recorded? Sweet. Okay, we're recording tonight's discussion. So I have here Frank Mendez here, Dolissa Medina, one of our filmmakers, Stephen Cano, and Josie Flores. And I'm just gonna let them talk a little bit about who they are, what they do here, and we can get into conversation after.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Frank Mendez. I am a long-term survivor. I was diagnosed in 1992. Can you hear me? I was going to do that danza de los viejitos, but I don't think I can do it now. I'm more viejito than danza anyway. But I was telling her that when I was in Head Start, I actually danced the danza. But I'm so old now, I don't remember it. But yeah, and like she was saying, I was invited to participate in this panel discussion because I have a lot of experience working with people with AIDS. When I saw the screen, I actually saw it in real life. I saw friends die of Kaposi sarcoma. I saw friends losing their eyesight. I saw friends deteriorate. Back in 1998, I was a vibrant 24-year-old, and I was succumbed to thrush in my system, and the doctor told me I had 2 years to live. I ended up weighing 72 pounds. I went from being 24 to a body of an 80-year-old. I remember not being able to walk. I remember using a cane, a walker. I had my partner change my diaper and feed me. I was desperate, scared, and yet I decided I was not going to give up. One of the scenes in the movie was talking about taking steps. I remember we were in Idaho, and we were going to go to Las Vegas, but at the time I had a walker, and my partner told me, I don't think you'll make it, Frank, so I'm going to take you to Reno. That's a small Vegas. I think you'll be able to handle it, and I took that personal. How dare he tell me I can't do it? I remember we got to the hotel, and he went up the stairs. There was 13 steps to the third floor, and I got off. I threw the walker, and I walked up those 13 steps. And I remember sitting at the very last step, and I sat there and I cried. And he walked out. I go, why is your walker thrown? I don't need a walker. I'm not going to give up. I came back weighing 167 pounds. They've killed me already 4 times, and yet I'm still here. And I contribute that to the wonderful people that surround me. I've been surrounded by so many people that care. I put myself in situations where I would not wish it upon anybody. I've cared for people who lost their sight. I cared for people who had nobody to hold their hand. I cared for people that were subjected to the worst cruel treatment by their own families. And because of that, I decided to do a World AIDS Day in 1995 at the Basilica de la Virgen de San Juan, the first World AIDS Day done here in the Valley. And I did that because all my friends, all their concern was, nobody will ever remember me. And my goal is that they never be forgotten. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm here to answer any questions. Next.
I'm very touched to hear. So I'm Dolissa. I did Viejito, Enfermito, Grito, and I was very touched to hear your story, or what you were saying about being 24 years old and using a cane. Because my own cousin, too, was 25, and I was 15 when I saw him walking with a cane. And it was a very distinct memory from my teenage years, being in the closet, seeing the shame of AIDS and HIV. We ultimately lost him. He was not able to survive. But I think that I did this film because I did want to explore with a friend of mine who is a long-term survivor, kind of what would it be like to take something that was very specific to our experience growing up in Brownsville, where we danced the Danza de los Viejitos as part of Charo Days. And of course, it has a much longer tradition going back to the Pura Pecha people in Michoacan. I decided it would be an interesting sort of exercise to explore a lot of these experiences with my long-term friend. I was never able to ask my cousin about his experiences or what happened, and I think the fact that we still have long-term survivors is very important. We need to continue to tell their stories and try to just, never forget that we still are in this crisis, that infection rates are still very high in our community. And so I'm very happy to be working with ENTRE, with Valley AIDS Council, with, the Matamoros museum today to just increase the visibility, the awareness, and to do what we can to prevent, continued suffering and just try to make sure that the community stays healthy. So.
Thank you for the introduction earlier. My name is Stephen. I'm the Community Mobilizations HIV Prevention Specialist for the Valley AIDS Council. I was able to kind of, have like a sneak peek of some of the films before tonight's screening, and just in watching the films, I was super moved, but also it was a thing, how do I explain this? It was a thing of like, at 30, I'm 30 years old, to know that we have been in this epidemic for more than 30 years, and it wasn't until about 2017 when I experienced my own HIV scare, and then getting tested. Now it's so beautiful to see and hear like Frank sharing their story and their like testament, and Dolissa creating a film that has also just brought in our culture. I think our culture down here in the Valley with stigma, it's so refreshing to see that you have tied both our culture to really dismantle that stigma. And I think that that is one of the biggest challenges that we face, that was faced back then and is still currently faced now, is that there's still so much stigma surrounding HIV. And it's just really beautiful to see that there are films that are being produced and that we can like archive and then continue to share to ultimately, end that HIV stigma and just continuing community health. Like, I love that you just said sharing and promoting community health, because I think that's like the really big key, is that it's not just, health isn't just one thing, right? And sexual health also isn't just one thing. It's a very big community effort. And so all together, we're able to hopefully end that stigma that there still is in it. So thank you, Frank, for sharing your story, continuing to share it, and being such an advocate. And then, Dolissa, it's just so great to like finally meet you and then see the film and then just be in the presence of community. It's really awesome.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Josie Flores. I'm the director of the health promotions team at Valley AIDS Council. Our role at Valley AIDS Council is to really encourage everybody to support the community. We provide free HIV STI testing, and we also assist people getting into services. But really what I love about what we're doing today is that we're all here together, and we're here because we love our community, we love our family, we love our friends, and we want to encourage people to get empowered to test, to talk about experiences, and to talk to each other, to let everyone know that we're really not by ourselves. And I think the videos we saw were really powerful, and for people to see them, I know I felt like, wow, okay, I'm not alone. I have family, I have friends, and I'm glad that these films are made so other people can see that people aren't alone. And I think that's really important when it comes to talking about HIV, testing, talking about sexual health, and empowering our community to talk about it, Tim.
Thank you all. I guess we can talk a little bit more about like the film specifically, and I guess in the context of the larger program, Dolissa. Like, for you, when you were approached by Valley Aids, because Dolissa was commissioned by Valley Aids to make this film, how was that thought process? Did you already know that this was a concept that you were already working on, or how did you kind of come to the idea, and how did you bring it together?
Okay, well, I actually approached the Valley AIDS Council as I approached you. And this is, like I said, a project that was commissioned by Visual Aids in New York City. They're a nonprofit that puts together a Day Without Art every year. I think they've been making video commissions since, I believe, 2014. They also, Visual Aids is a nonprofit that supports artists with HIV/AIDS, and they are actually the originators too of the red ribbon and a lot of these symbols. So just for me, I'm very honored to be a part of this tradition that has incorporated a lot of artists over the years. Just kind of name them like they're kind of like really big names. I'm like, wow, I'm part of this tradition. So yeah, my friend Gerardo and I, who I've known for 30 years, he was diagnosed. This year was the year that was his 30th anniversary, and we just decided, like I said, to collaborate together. It's part of a bigger project that we have called Grito Viejito, like you see in the credits of the film. This film is the first step in what will be an ongoing project where we use the Viejito figure to talk about issues such as HIV histories, aging, elders, mental health, and our futures, right? How do we see our queer futures? And so I'm interested in working with queer youth in the Valley. So it's kind of an ongoing work, so this is a way to kick it off. And so this film, we shot it in when was it, in the spring? And most of the year was devoted to editing it. C was actually one of the people who was also involved in the project as the colorist. So in terms of how the colors in there that really pop, they're so beautiful. That's part of their beautiful work. And yeah, it's, like I said, it kind of takes a community to put it together. Our camera person is someone based in Oakland, but is originally from McAllen. And so that was nice to kind of have that presence too. But an interesting story, the other camera person we were supposed to have got COVID, right? And so that's part of what this project is about. This theme for this year, Everyone I Know is Sick. It's the idea of drawing connections between HIV and other forms of illness and disability, and how in many ways, like, it's to be disabled is not sort of something that is separate from the norm. In lots of ways that disability is like a normal situation right now, and how do we sort of confront those issues around bigger questions of health care in this society. So yeah, I mean, that kind of gives you a little bit of context about what the film was, and it was a labor of love, and yeah, it just basically took as an artist, it took up my entire focus and energy all this year, and I'm finally happy to see it come to the fruition, and I'm really happy and proud that, again, we're premiering it here in 3 places in South Texas and in Matamoros, and it's unprecedented and it's very exciting. And Valley AIDS Council has been incredibly helpful in bringing the programming also to Brownsville, where it all started. Right when I was a kid in Chowder, watching the Chowder Days parade in Brownsville. We have the viejitos dancing. And they scared me when I was a kid, and they represented a lot of my fears of, like, kind of getting older and mortality. And so the idea that we can look at this culture from this idea that you could take a scary memory or a traumatic memory, but empower yourself with it. These traumatic memories as a child, my traumatic memories as a queer closeted teenager, seeing my cousin in the hospital dying. But how can we transform that? And ultimately collectively work together and kind of pass the cane to one another, and together be a collective effort towards healing. The grito.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to kind of touch on the collectivity efforts that we have up on stage right now, and I wanted Frank and Stephen and Josie to kind of talk a little bit about more of the specifics of, like, the work that you're doing here in the Rio Grande Valley, communities you serve, how people can get involved or get in touch or access the resources you all have to provide. Whoever would like to go first, I suppose. Right.
Back in 1996, I believe, I was part of a photo compilation called Faces of AIDS. And this compilation of photos depicted different people, not just gay men. There was children, There was elderly men, straight men, women, and children. And I remember 3 years ago, we did the World AIDS Day at the Basilica. And I remember these pictures being brought in, and as I'm standing there at the altar, I was so moved because I came to the realization that all of those people in those black and white portraits are no longer with us. The only one still here is me. And I took that like a guilt. I celebrate that I'm alive. I celebrate that I'm going to be an old man living with HIV, something I never thought I would say. I never thought I would live the day where it's undetectable and transmittable. I never thought there'd be a day where I could say, I'm living with HIV, and so what? And I remember bringing up this idea of putting together a compilation of photos in color of long-term survivors. It's a different time, it's a different era, but the issues are still the same. And I think that by sharing our stories, and I remember bringing up this idea, thinking, oh my God, but who am I gonna ask to do it? And I'm lucky that I was surrounded by a lot of loving people, supportive people. All I had to say was, I need at least 10 of us to show face. And immediately, 12 of us signed up. These portraits were at the epicenter in the entrance of the Vida conference at the Mission Event Center on November the 10th. I remember walking in, I was so impacted by it. But not only because of the portrait, but because of the conversations going around. And I think that during the conference, they also had 4 long-term survivors in a panel discussion. You think that my story is inspiring? No. I have a friend that was born with it. No fault of her own. And yet, she faced the same issues I faced as a gay man. Innocent young lady, innocent baby, and yet faced all the hate, all the stigma, the discrimination, isolation, you name it. And it's sad. It's sad because I'm part of the peer mentor program, and the peer mentor, we meet clients that were newly diagnosed. And it is a shame that the same stories we were saying in the late 80s, early 90s are being said in the 2000s. It's a shame. And I believe that us, the long-term survivors, the aging population, have a duty. We have a duty to share our stories, because our stories are going to be what's going to help the community deal with the stigma, the ignorance, and the bigotry associated with this disease. And I'm so honored that I was contacted 4 years ago in Idaho by a producer named Gabriel Sanchez. I'm sure everybody knows him in this room. He contacted me asking me, well, actually Isaac called me and said, Frank, there's a producer that's doing a documentary in the Valley, and he really, really wants to talk to you. And I'm thinking, well, why? I never do anything to get the confetti thrown at me. I don't want to get compensated. I do it because I feel there's a need, that it needs to be done. When I decided to go public, I knew what I was gonna face, but I was willing to take it. I shared a story earlier about a pantry, and one day you're gonna see it, because I think that that's what's gonna help us get into the schools, because I think it's important that we, as long-term survivors, share our stories. We did interviews in Telemundo. I was telling the young man over here, Trucha, that I go to an adult daycare with my mom, and I told him, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, Telemundo's doing a series on long-term survivors. Myself, Lucy, and Kendall did those interviews. And I said, I'm gonna come back on Monday, and we're gonna have a lengthy discussion about those interviews. Every morning we show up, we drink coffee, we eat breakfast, y bingo. La chalupa, el catrín, a bingo. I mean, that's all you focus Monday through Friday from 9 to 1:30. That Monday morning, nobody asked to play bingo. The whole conversation was about HIV and AIDS. I learned in that room, at least 6 grandmothers lost grandkids. 6 mothers lost kids. 7 brothers lost a brother or sister. That moment was the first time they were able to talk about AIDS in their family. And I'm honored to be able to share my story. I'm honored to be part of this. When Gabriel told me that he interviewed many people here in the valley, I was 2,000 miles away. He was telling me stories I didn't even remember about. People that I touched, people that learned from me, people that were inspired by me, shared their stories with Gabriel. And Gabriel made it a point to contact me. We were on the phone for about 4 hours, that first interview. I came down, they interviewed me, went back. When I came back, I said, I remember passing through the Basilica, thinking, I'm never gonna do that again. I only had to mention it once, about doing another World AIDS Day. This past year, Valley AIDS Council came on board, and my God, I was so emotionally drained. Even today, when I see those videos of all those portraits coming in, those are people that were gone too soon. Those are people that deserve to be remembered and respected and appreciated, because we were the guinea pigs. I tell kids nowadays, you know what? The road has been laid. Color it like those portraits. Times are different, but the attitudes aren't changed. Thank you.
And for those of you who might not be aware, Gabriel Sanchez is the producer of the documentary Pansy Pachanga. If you're not following them already on Instagram and Facebook, please follow them. Lots of LGBTQIA history from the Valley that they are archiving and spreading the good word across the nation and the world. So yeah, Stephen, tell us about your work.
So I work for the Valley AIDS Council. We are a nonprofit sexual health clinic that provides that provides preventative care and treatment for people who are living with HIV. We have a booth out over in the back, so if you haven't, we have some good little swag, and we also have at-home HIV test kits. So if you've never been tested for HIV, or if you're in the need to get tested for HIV, when we're done here, you'll see me in the back, and we can go ahead and get you linked up. We did bring our outreach van. That has already gone though, but a big thing that we do for our community is we come out to either events, or you'll see us at parks. So we'll have the van. If you follow us on our social media platforms, you'll always be up to date as to where we're going to be. Because we know, right, sometimes you don't want to have to go into the office to get tested. And so our biggest thing is, let's come to you. Let's make sure that we are doing everything that we can for our community. There's a lot of things that we do in regards to our community for sexual health and just overall health and wellness. I've been with the organization since 2019, and I feel like it has just not stopped. So many people, I think Frank always tells me, he's like, I just always see you going and going. And I'm like, I know. But really it's about you all. It's about being present with you all. It's about having conversations with you all. In the same way that over the course of 5 years, I've been learning, I really accredit it to the community. Every single conversation that I have with someone, it's new, it's different. Frank, you just said it right now, times have changed, but the challenges have stayed the same, which is so crazy. And if anything, I think after the COVID-19 pandemic, we're still kind of in one. We've seen those challenges increase. And through multiple different social determinants of health, here at the Valley AIDS Council, we're trying to make sure that we are bridging that gap between said social determinant of health and the community member. But I think, overall, your health and well-being is something that we, on our end, really value for our community, and we just want to continue to share and spread that awareness. And then I think Ms. Josie can probably tell you a lot more of the services wise, but it's so much fun. It's one of the best things to do.
So Stephen did a beautiful job explaining our services. We do have a table with our information. You can look us up online. Another part of Valley AIDS Council is our LGBT Youth Resource Center, which is Casa Orgullo. And Casa Orgullo, the role that we play at Casa Orgullo is to create safe spaces in the RGV for individuals who identify as LGBT, part of the LGBT community, their family, their friends, and their allies, to build either leadership skills, connect with the community, find their networks, meet other people, access resources. If there are no resources, I think Valley AIDS Council has done a really good job about creating resources for people. And so that's another activity that we do provide to the community, is creating a safe space, working with organizations, working with people, and connecting other organizations to work together. Because as we all know, here in the Valley, we don't have a lot of resources, but I think what we really do well here in the Valley is we work really well together. So if we know someone, we always let other people know about other services available, other people doing work, and other organizations. So I think for the Valley, we do a really, really good job of making sure that we share what we do have here, which is a really beautiful thing that we do here. Yeah. And again, we're online, so you can find us Valley AIDS Council, and also back there, you're more than welcome to get our information.
Definitely check out their booth in the back. They have a lot of really awesome information and swag, and yeah, they're in McAllen, Harlingen, and Brownsville, so lots of locations. I guess at this point, if anyone has any questions or comments about the program or Dolissa's film, and specifically since we have Dolissa here, I wanted to open it up to see if there were any comments or questions or just thoughts. Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Eric. I guess like a topic of discussion, or maybe a question, is like, when I think of stigma, or when I think of things like homophobia, specifically in the RGV, I think of its cause is maybe like a lack of information, but also just the culture that exists down here. And I wonder which battle is harder, the information, like the lack thereof of information, or the culture, or maybe it's not separate battles, maybe it's one core thing. So yeah, just wanted your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think, yeah, well, let's just say something real quick. I think it's a combination of both. It definitely is a matter of there not being as many resources and comprehensive information. And when we go back to our culture, I use this analogy all the time when I speak to like students or like teachers and parents, is that our culture is like really great at celebrating the quinceañera, which is amazing. But then 10 months later, we're celebrating a baby, right? And so they're very preventable things, right? A pregnancy is amazing and it's a blessing, as they say. But if we can teach our, youth from an earlier onset of comprehensive science-based, education or just sexual health, when it comes into LGBTQ, that is like constantly just, I want to say, like really a bigger uphill battle, especially in a state where, one, the resources are either always shut down or legislation is always trying to get passed to pretty much eradicate a certain group of within the LGBTQ population. So it really is, it's both. It's kind of like we don't have that resource, and then our culture tells us one thing, and we want to make sure that because of our culture down here, that we're giving culturally appropriate sexual health information, right? And a lot of times culturally appropriate sexual health information doesn't really include LGBTQ health because, the Mexican American culture is very much on a binary. Yeah, thank you. It's very much on a binary, clearly within the language. Does anyone have anything else, like any other?
I think what's really interesting about that, like Steven said, a lot of times for me when I see or experience stigma, it's always surprising because it doesn't come from community. It comes from other organizations. It comes from leadership, and sometimes it's very surprising when it comes from leadership or politics. But I think we should give our community more credit sometimes, because sometimes our credit, they might not be familiar with it, but they're more open than not to getting that information, talking to us, coming to our events. But when we have big organizations or big companies pushing a stigma and pushing it to make harder to accept everything, that's what I think influences a lot of community to kind of back up. But here, for me, what I've seen is more the community is more open to hearing us out and hearing about our work, participating than actual, maybe outside bigger organizations.
Now, going back to the stigma, 3 years ago I attended the first conference, the Vida conference, and I remember there was a speaker from New York, a speaker from Dallas, and then they were showing videos of people from, I don't know from where. And I remember mentioning to Rachel, we live in a whole different area. Our culture is different because of the border. Our situation is so much different. Why are we not hearing stories of people from here? Well, this year, I heard during the post-tour meeting that Gilead said that they were so impressed because Valley AIDS Council holds the most long-term survivors willing to stand up and share their stories. I think, and I'm a firm believer in this, because the story that I shared with the pantry, I didn't say one word, but that presentation will go down in the books as the very best one without me saying one word. Why? Because I was taught that these kids that I went to go speak to didn't hear me speak, but they were touched by what was done to me. And that was empathy. They showed empathy. I don't want nobody's sympathy. I want empathy, because empathy will fight stigma. Josie, you made a very good point. Stigma is amongst us. We carry that stigma like a sack. Throw it away, ignore it. The more you mention it, the more it lives. I never thought I'd be standing here today, 30 years later, and say, I'm an aging queen, I'm an aging long-term survivor. They were talking about providing services for the long-term, for the aging at the Basilica, and I'm like, I need to talk about me. I know they're not talking about me. It's difficult to celebrate because I carry on my shoulders a lot of people's lives. One in particular, we have not addressed this, but our transsexual community. Our transsexual community is being attacked in ways that is so undeserving. They're just human beings trying to live. Which brings me to a story about a friend named Dolissa. Dolissa she was from Harlingen. She left her home because her family rejected her. She came down from New York, saw me do an interview, thought I worked for the Basilica, went and looked for me at the Basilica. Found me through Sister Marian Stolmeyer at Comfort House. I learned she was one of the first 5 transsexuals in New York in the United States. I lost contact with her years later. She lived with me for about 6 or 7 months, something like that. And I mentioned her to Gabriel, and we were looking for her, till finally, 3 days before World AIDS Day, I get a text. It's a copy of her license asking me, do you know this person? I immediately called Gabriel. Gabriel, you're not gonna believe, but I didn't know why they were trying to contact her. They were looking for somebody that knew her so that they could go and disconnect her. I attempted to contact the family, and the family said, we don't want nothing to do with her. Nothing to do with her. And I freaked. Oh my God, what am I gonna do? Luckily, I'm surrounded again by very supportive, loving people. Step, VAC, everybody in my circle pitched in, and we were able to give her a decent farewell. Louisa should never be forgotten because her struggles, even though she didn't have HIV, her only sin, like they said in the movie, her only sin was to try to be her own authentic self. And yet, the sinners were just being haters. Those families, one day, their families are going to learn how they took care of their own. And it's a shame. Again, back to the stigma. If we continue carrying that sack full of shit, that's all it's going to always be. A sack full of shit, because that's what it is. If we continue to stick to the stigma is going to, and yeah, it's a shame. It's there, yes. But we need to learn to ignore it. Because we're keeping it alive. If I have the courage to say, to hell with stigma, why doesn't everybody else? Because stigma kills more people than AIDS nowadays. So much hatred going around in the world that here around us, there's nothing like that. So again, stigma doesn't exist unless you keep it alive. Thank you.
Is there any other questions out in the audience?
Yeah, sure.
Josue.
So, Dolissa, you mentioned that this was a series, like the inauguration of a series speaking about, about aging, about survivors, but also about the youth. So I'm curious as to how can we get a sneak peek of how you're planning to connect the both, or, do that?
Sure. So what I'd like to do in 2024 is start developing a program, which would be called Grito Viejito in the Rio Grande Valley, GB and RGV. It would be like the second stage. I think it's interesting once I've worked with a long-term survivor, and we're beginning to open up the conversation to bring more people into the collective, right? It's an artist collective with like queer brown folks, mostly like Mexican American, Chicano, Mexicano, immigrant, and indigenous, because right now what we feel is very important is to bring in the indigenous worldview as we develop this program for queer youth. I think that a lot of, especially in Brownsville, a lot of people do the dance in those viejitos, but they don't really know what it is, right? And so I think it's important for us to kind of understand it and then kind of reinterpret it from the perspective of it being kind of like a healing dance, or understanding what the histories are. And so I'm in conversation with, Casa Orgullo is one possible group of students that I could be working with. I'd love to hear from them how they might want to develop the project. It's something I'd like to do towards the end of the year. I do have an Indiegogo, right? So if folks are interested, they could, I could share that information, or you could scan and to support. And yeah, it's just basically putting together a program, the pilot program. We would use the art, film, writing, mask making, TikTok dances, anything to do with like the viejito as a way to spark conversation around these various issues. And the theme for next year, so every year we choose a theme. This was the first year for Grito Viejito, and the theme was queer world mending and the wounded healer, right? The idea that both Gerardo, my collaborator, is a bit of a wounded healer. So my memory, I'm wounded, but I'm trying to do healing as a wounded healer. And in 2024, the theme will be blood ties. And it's where we will look at blood as like kinship, family, HIV status, ancestry. And right now we're in the process of looking for funding, trying to get funding from arts organizations, from health community organizations, and basically just create a pilot program with youth at the end of the year, right? And then figure out how to improve on it, how it could be something that could expand and go to other communities. And eventually there might be like Grito Viejito groups throughout the United States and Mexico, right? And we could have intergenerational exchange, an emphasis on community health, on harm reduction. And every community could kind of take these principles and adapt it to their own community to address what they feel is the most pressing. And so it'd be kind of like a loose organization, but just as long as you follow the principles. And so I'm at the very early stages, but definitely could use your support. And this is like a way to launch it and to make people aware that I do want to be kind of bringing it back home, right? That this is where it started, and this is where I'd like to kind of start with part 2. And then part 3, you know, maybe we go in something else. I'd love to eventually take it to Michoacan, right? And do a cultural exchange back and forth. But the idea too is that we have this philosophy. It's kind of like part of the dance is called el trenecito, you know, where you take the cane and you pass it on to the other person, and everybody walks together holding the cane together. And that's the same idea of grito viejito, that we're sort of passing the cane to the back and then passing the cane forward. And it's sort of one community connects to the next community, connects to the next. And so the wisdom becomes kind of collective, and then we sort of move forward. And I'm kind of curious where that's going to go. It's something I'd like to try to develop. You know, I'm committed to seeing where it goes, at least in the next like 2 to 5 years, and then pass it on to somebody else, you know. So that's the idea. Thank you for asking.
Oh. Yeah. That's what that grito viejito. I saw a lot of young men go from 18, 19, 20, 24 to looking like 70 in less than 3 months. I knew about the danza de los viejitos because I was telling you earlier, but never in my wildest dreams did I think I was going to be standing there associating that with my disease. And quite frankly, it's exactly as the dance depicted, because I was a vibrant 24-year-old, full of life. I mean, I was so in fieras with life that nothing was stopping me. I had the ninja nut behind me, and nothing was going to stop me because I had a ninja nut behind me. And even then, I collapsed. I remember I went from 180 to 72 pounds. No immune system, none, zero. And I remember coming to visit my grandmother, and they took a picture of me. And when we went to Walgreens, developed the picture, saw the picture. Oh my God, why didn't you tell me I look like that? I was a skeleton. My face, I mean, you could draw my bones in my face, my body, my ribs. I couldn't walk from here down from there. I went from a 24-year-old to a 79-year-old in less than 6 months. Even then, I was caring for people because nobody would want to even touch them. I remember picking up somebody from the McAllen Medical Center because the nurses would not allow him to stay in the hospital. Those were the situations we were dealing with. And when I saw this, I mean, it took me back. It took me back to a very dark time in my life. A very, very dark time in my life. And I remember we went to a thing in El Paso, and Rachel was sitting across from me. And I told Rachel, I hate the Frank you met in 1992. I hate it. And she says, why? She goes, because Frank didn't understand what was going on. Now, oh boy, I appreciate life, and I appreciate everything and anything that is given to help support people like myself. I'm surrounded by an individual who inspires me so much, because this individual is also a long-term survivor, but of two diseases, cancer and HIV. And yet, she's got more strength than I do. And every time I want to give up, every time I'm saying, I'm tired, I don't want to do, I see this individual, and I get back up and I challenge myself. And that's what I think we all need to do. We need to challenge ourselves to be able to say, you know what, I have a friend who's HIV positive. If you want to meet him, he'll come and talk to you. And not say, I don't even know him. I remember back in 91, I was surrounded by a bunch of people. When I came out public, it's as if you had sprayed rain on other roaches of shoo, 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 shoo. Because the association, I don't want to be seen with somebody who has HIV because they're going to think I have HIV. And that's sad. We interviewed newly diagnosed, and it hurts me to hear that they parked in the parking lot but didn't have the courage to come inside because they didn't want to be seen. That's a shame. That is a big shame. So I ask everybody, challenge yourselves. Have a conversation with your friends, with your neighbor. Hey, I met this guy who was aging. It was HIV positive and lived through a time where HIV equals death. And it's no longer that way. Now you equals you. There's a big difference. But yet, it took a lot of confronting a society that was ignorant, but shouldn't be ignorant because there's a lot of us willing to educate. And I think that if we put these long-term survivors to work in our schools, we will begin to open doors. And we will be embraced by a community that's hungry for knowledge, but yet deprived of it. And I think that that is our duty. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you for bringing this to light. And anything I can do to support you, I'm here. Why not?
I really appreciate that, Frank, because I think one thing that I think is important to talk about it when I talk about like the Grito Viejito idea is that I'm like Generation X, so I was a teenager when this was happening. And so in lots of ways, like those queer mentors, those role models, like we lost them, right? Like I think about like who would have been my cousin 10 years older than me, like if he had stayed in my life. But we witnessed that, right? We witnessed it from the perspective of young people scared, coming out, like not knowing. But there are still these long-term survivors. And in some ways, I feel that a project such as the Grito Viejito could be that bridge, or someone from my perspective, is that we are enabling this intergenerational dialogue. Because I was like a witness, but yet like in some ways now I'm the one who's also being like trying to be a role model for these kids. And it's not like, yes, you equals you. It's not the death sentence, thank God, but there are so many other death sentences that are being, put on kids today, queer kids. And so when you think about like, the viejito, like also like it's about mental health too. It's like, how can we imagine ourselves as older people? What makes our lives worth living? Why do we not kill ourselves when like politicians and everyone just want us to exist? And so for me, the idea of celebrating our culture, of recognizing this strength and seeing the wisdom of our elders, and that again, the continuing line, like how do we imagine ourselves in the future? How do we see ourselves as the viejitos, the elders, living long lives, making choices to allow for these long lives? So that again, like there's vibrancy and joy in life, and that we have this exchange, like right, this continuity. And that's the thing is like HIV/AIDS crisis. It was such like in terms of that all that wisdom, and that was we lost. And like you said, you are so important. Like Gerardo was in my film. Like that's the whole idea with this. How do we take this film and show it to people and use it to spark conversation, new art, new imaginations? What is the world we want to build in the future? What is our queer future, and that we want to create? And so that's why I would love to stay in touch with you while I'm here developing the project.
All right, everyone. If no one else has any questions or comments, we're going to wrap it up. We'll be around, check out the table for Valley AIDS Council. Trucha's also here. Check in with them. We have a table out in the back if you want to get a calendar or any information about ENTRE, or sign up for our newsletter to know more about our programming such as this. Please feel free. I want to thank all of y'all for being here tonight, and Dolissa for joining us.
for this little tour in the valley of your film and part of World AIDS Day and Day Without Art. Very happy to be able to support this project. And yeah, thank you all for coming. So have a good evening.
In closing, I have to tell you this joke because even though I was sick, I was 72 pounds. I went to the doctor in Boise, Idaho, and he tells me he's going to start by doing me a rectal exam. Doctor, if you're going to mess with my anatomy, you better explain to me exactly what you're going to do. So he proceeds to telling me put a small condom on my index finger, lube and insert it into your rectum. Doctor, can you use 2 fingers? And he says, for what? I go for the second opinion. I'm closing with that. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.